If you've, talked to me over the course of the past year at any point, you're probably already rather annoyed at the fact that I bring up City of Mist in every single conversation that I enter. I could be on trial for murder, and I would use my time on the stand to expound the virtues of City of Mist. So now that none of my IRL friends will even talk to me anymore, I have to use my power over you, my captive audience, to tell you why I think City of Mist is the greatest stroke of genius I have ever seen in the role-playing space, and why you should play it. City of Mist is a mythological superhero detective noir RPG that espouses a sort of comic book aesthetic in both its artwork and the way that the play is structured. Though of course, given that we all sit around a table talking when we play it, there's a bit of leeway in how you actually run it. It comes with a tremendous framework to create your own character, but it also comes with a whole roster of pre-generated characters if you're a new player just trying to jump in, or if you need some inspiration as to what are the things that you can do in this game. Fundamentally, every single character is some sort of mundane, normal-ish person living in a big city, mixed with the powers of some mythological concept or idea. You have Salamander, a city water worker who is also a fire elemental. Murad Conroy, a child psychologist who is also the boogeyman. Lance Sullivan, an investigative journalist with the powers of Don Quixote de la Mancha, or as he is known in English, the one with the windmills. There's Flicker, an idealistic hacker who fights for a better world with the powers of the Roman messenger god Mercury. Bodhi, a gamer who lives in his mom's basement and is also a Shaolin master. Detective Enkidu is a copper with the powers of the Sumerian wildling Enkidu. Basically, if it's an idea, it can be a City of Mist mythos. The framework underlying the game design of City of Mist is known as the Apocalypse engine, which, though in and of itself considered by me a absolute stroke of genius, it is not the stroke of genius for which I love City of Mist so much. So for decades, most games in the role-playing space have been defined by these tabletop-like mechanics. This makes sense because they're all ultimately descended from the Russian Kriegsspiel, which was supposed to emulate realistic battlefield conditions to, train generals. Which, that is of course not what we are trying to do here. We're trying to have a cool story with the cast of us. So the design approach was that you would come up with a set of rules to bed your fiction in, and to do that, you would come up with various different kinds of situations that might emerge in that fiction. And then you think how that specific kind of situation in the fiction might be represented mechanically by translating the fictional game world into rules. For instance, you could have the classic a D20 type system of some sort, where you usually fight on land, but you might have slightly different systems for when you fight underwater, or while you are flying or something, or on a cliffside. And when you enter a different kind of situation in the game world, the underlying mathematical structure also changes. This of course means that you need to memorize a whole bunch of rules or interrupt play to find some specific rule that you will only need maybe 2 or 3 times in your entire gaming career. But then in 2010, a game called Apocalypse World came out, which won a bunch of awards for deciding to break with all of that. And then in 2012, Dungeon World came out, which really popularized this approach with the more big appeal of having a fantasy game as opposed to a post-apocalyptic game that does these things. The idea was to not derive the rules from the specific conditions within the fiction of the game world, but to instead create rules that represent the cinematic implications of whatever a given character is doing at any given time, which is the way that storytellers think about stories. A lot of games have a lot of rules that you really do not need. They are only there to represent the difference mathematically between fighting underwater and fighting up in the air. Powered by the Apocalypse has none of these problems. It just uses the so-called called moves, which are the very core, the bread and butter of any apocalypse system. The basic structure of a move is thus. You say what your character wants to do, then you and the GM agree what move that is specifically, and you roll 2d6. If you roll 6 or under, something bad will happen to you that will, in most scenarios, stop you from achieving the thing that you're trying to achieve. If you roll a 7 to 9, you get there, but there's some complications. On a 10 or higher, you just straight up succeed. This is the only kind of dice roll that you need when you play Powered by the Apocalypse, and in theory, this is also the only rules that you need. The consequences of your roll are entirely narrative and do not need to necessarily follow from your character's actions, although they usually will, because very often, opportunities for that will present themselves. Let's say, for instance, you are trying to cross a frozen lake, which is a dangerous proposition. Now, most traditional RPGs will have specific mechanics in place for this kind of thing. You might have to track rounds or calculate your weight and the thickness of the ice. There's games that have equations for you to do this kind of thing. GURPS. Powered by the Apocalypse realizes that what you're really doing is attempting something very risky that could have extremely dangerous consequences if it goes wrong. And in any story, there's really only 3 outcomes to how that can go. You might succeed, get a 10 or more, the bestest and simplest outcome. On a 7 to 9, things get a little bit complicated, and the GM gets to make a soft move against you, which could be represented by a simple moment of, oh no, the ice is beginning to crack all around me. On the other hand, that soft move might also be that the ice doesn't crack, and you see underneath it like a dark, very big shadow moving underneath it. Or maybe in the distance, from the direction that you're coming from, you hear the war horn of the Ice Raider tribe. The way you react to this defines what the next move is that you take. If you roll a 6 or under, the ice underneath you may crack and you may fall into the water. That's a very just simple outcome. But what might also happen is that the frost salamander that you saw earlier as a shadow might pop out of the ice and come at you, or the arrows from the Ice Raider tribe might be flying down on you in like a big hail. The core system of Powered by the Apocalypse is setup and payoff, which are the beats around which any story is structured. Unlike traditional RPGs, where good storytelling GMs will weave in setup and payoff, but the rules will rather often disagree with what they're trying to do. Powered by the Apocalypse realizes that what you're doing fundamentally is not playing a game, but playing a story. So the mechanics it uses are not the mechanics of a game, but the mechanics of a story. In theory, you could improvise everything with hard and soft moves, but usually PBTA rulebooks will come with examples and specified moves that were written by the designers, like kind of what we were doing earlier, to provide examples of what interesting things might happen. Because then you already have a bunch of cool ideas and don't need to come up with every amazing twist on the fly. Moves can also be pretty much seamlessly integrated with each other because, getting hit by arrows is also a negative outcome when you're trying to evade arrows. Narratively, what you're doing is still trying to avoid danger. Different Powered by the Apocalypse games have different ways of implementing these moves. Most of them have a list of core moves that all characters have access to that are built around the main things that characters will be doing in the game. Like, fighting melee, or traveling through the wilderness, performing a daring feat. It really depends on what the game is about. Many of them have custom moves for specific characters that not all characters have access to, like going into a battle rage as a big fuck-off barbarian. Not everyone can just do that. Some games are more cinematic, others are more specific in the way that they write rules. In City of Mist, which is a lot more cinematic, creating a magical shield, hiring a crack team of lawyers, barricading yourself in a room, or healing someone's injuries are all represented through the core move of Change the Game. Whether you're in a library of ancient tomes, investigating a crime scene, trawling data on the internet, that's all the Investigate move. But that is not the truly genius and revolutionary aspect of City of Mist. You see, in most games, even most Powered by the Apocalypse games, Characters have stats. If you have a high strength stat, you will get a flat numerical bonus to your dice roll if you are attempting to do something strengthfully. City of Mist does not have stats. Instead, characters are built out of power tags, which are short, poignant statements of fact about the character that you can invoke when rolling dice in some particular situation, if you can justify them coming in useful. So for instance, if you're playing Salamander and you're chasing someone, the fact that he knows every street and is good at snooping around will come in handy to you, so you'll get +2 to that roll. If you're trying to not get hit by a massive tentacle from a giant kraken, you can dodge it while at the same time also deflecting it away from you to improve your dodge with a plasma barrier. You just describe what you do with the words on the character sheet. And this is so natural and intuitive that I've come around to thinking, why did we ever play games any other way? Think about this, right? To a lot of players, the process of creating a character is translating their idea of what they want their character to be into the abstract framework of what the game has decided it can represent mechanically. And let me tell you, as someone who often has very specific ideas about what his characters are supposed to be like, I don't like the fact that for my roguishly handsome rogue, I had to spend experience points to buy like a paragraph of text wherein it says that I get +2 to the base attitude of the NPC's social roles when I'm trying to convince them to make fuck with my character if they are attracted to my gender. It will not mechanically help me get a job in an acting troupe. It won't help me appear trustworthy to people because of the halo effect. It won't make anyone insecure when they're having an argument with me. My character isn't roguishly handsome. My character is +2 to the base attitude of an NPC that I'm trying to convince to make fuck with me if they are attracted to my gender. This is why I really hate talents and feats and stuff like that in games. There's either too few of them or there's way too many of them, and they are super restrictive and you cannot use them in interesting or creative ways. Now, a lot of GMs will play it rather fast and loose with the rules because they really want to see cool and interesting and creative things happen. So for them, I will be able to use the fact that I have purchased the roguishly handsome talent to maybe get a gig as an underwear model. And the fighter, who is my eternal rival in the group, who is competing with me for that same position, can use his incredible ability in athletics to compete for the same job. But why go through the effort of flaunting the rules and potentially breaking the game system in some way when you could just have rules that don't need flaunting? There is simply no need for this level of mechanical abstraction. The idea behind power attacks is that instead of writing a description of who your character is and then finding ways of abstractly representing that within the mechanical framework of whatever game you're trying to play, you just write that description, then you take a marker pen. I have marker pens that I could have used as a prop for this, I'm realizing just now. You use that marker pen to, like, mark a few poignant statements about the character, and boom, that is the mechanics of the character. There's no need to write down any numbers that will interact with various systems where they could just fly off the handle in a moment's notice. There's no more paladins that always have to be the most charming person in the group because for some reason they need this to cast spells. I want a thief who is good at lockpicking but not at stealth. But the entire game is built around I have to have a high dexterity stat if I want to be good at lockpicking. And if I have a high dexterity stat, I also have good stealth. I could never use stealth in the narrative, but I still invested those points into the character that are now wasted because the game is balanced a certain way. With power tags, I just write down handy with the lockpick and I don't write down stealthy, and that's then exactly what I wanted. If I want to be particularly handy with the lockpick, I can also have a power tag that's called My Trusty Lockpick, which takes up another one of my limited power tag slots, but gives me more specialized power at the cost of versatility. You don't need an itemized list of all the various different kinds of ropes that you own. A rope is an item with a narrative purpose. That's all it needs to be. In City of Mist, a character is a character, and not some series of mathematical equations. And I've never seen this done anywhere else before, at least not to this extent of design elegance. City of Mist, as much as I do love the setting, is just one of many possible applications for this marvelous idea of power tags, and I myself have been playing around with it rather liberally. I know for a fact that the creator of City of Mist has been playtesting like a high fantasy version of the rules of City of Mist, with the ultimate purpose of creating a genre-agnostic way of using power tags. Which, to be fair, I have also been doing that on my own time. I couldn't help myself, but I'm sure that whatever he comes up with is going to be a lot more clever. And I cannot wait to literally just stop playing every other game system forever. Not that that's particularly realistic, but at this point, unless I'm playing a game specifically because of the mechanics, which, let me tell you, happens very rarely, all of the games I used to enjoy just seem clunky and inelegant and mired in so many layers of unnecessary nonsense. They're inflexible, they don't encourage creativity. It's like I stepped out of Plato's cave, where the shadows are the idea that we need to translate fiction into numbers, and then outside it's just, you can just do the fiction. That's just the fiction. That's the real world. I'm not really here to play a game. I have Skyrim at home. I'm here to play a story with my friends. And no other system but City of Mist has ever allowed me to even approximate that to this degree. And that is why I think City of Mist is an absolute genius piece of RPG game design. Thank you very much for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe, share this to your relevant communities, but do not spam them. Consider supporting me on Patreon or Subscribestar, buying some of my merchandise or my short story collection. And in that spirit, do check out Son of Oak Games and City of Mist. I am not in the slightest sponsored by them, by the way. There is no such deal has been going on. This is a genuine glowing review done by me because I like the system. And thank you so much, Amit, for making this, and also everyone else involved. This has been a very big milestone in my favorite hobby. And yeah, basically, see you around, cunts.